when I hear the term AI for good, which we hear a lot of at the moment, I would say that I always challenge that, and I would encourage people to challenge that too by saying, are you sure this AI is for good? Are you sure this tech is for good? Are you sure that the good that it does far outweighs the potential harm that it has? Because it's not always the case. A lot of the AI for good examples that you see at the moment are just, they can't be backed with scientific data at all. And that comes back to another of my points. If you can't prove that it's for good, then it's not, and it's probably greenwashing.
Hello, and welcome to Environment Variables, brought to you by the Green Software Foundation. In each episode, we discuss the latest news and events surrounding green software. On our show, you can expect candid conversations with top experts in their field who have a passion for how to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions of software. I'm your host, Chris Adams. Welcome to Environment Variables, where we bring you the latest news and updates from the world of sustainable software development. I'm your host, Chris Adams. Our guest today is James Martin, a content and communications expert who has spent years translating complex tech strategies into compelling narratives that drive change. From leading communications with a special focus on sustainability at Scaleway to founding bettertech.blog, James has been at the forefront of making green tech more actionable and accessible. He's spoken at major climate and tech events, most recently Change Now. He's written a comprehensive white paper on green IT and played a key role in GenAI Impact, a French NGO working to measure the impact of AI. And also, he's a Green Software Foundation champion. So, James, thank you so much for joining the podcast. Really lovely to see you again after we last crossed paths in, I guess, Paris, I think. Maybe I've tried to introduce you a little bit, but I figure there's maybe some things you might want to talk about as well. So can I give you the floor to just introduce yourself and talk a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thanks very much, Chris. First and foremost, I just wanted to say I'm really happy to be on this podcast with you, because this podcast is one of the things that really got me excited and started me off on my green IT adventure. So thanks to you and to Anne for putting out all these amazing episodes. Basically, what I'm speaking today in the name of Better Tech, which is my blog, which I founded in 2018. So I've been a journalist for most of my career, and so for about 15 years, I was writing for a French cultural magazine. I had a page in that every 2 weeks, and I started off writing out, here's a new iPhone, here's a new console. And after that, I got a bit bored of just saying the same thing every time. So I was drawn towards more responsible topics like, how do you reduce your screen time? How do you protect your data? And also, of course, what is the impact of technology on the planet? That started in that magazine. And then I got so into it, I founded my own blog on the topic. And then that was pretty much when an opportunity came up in 2021 to work at Scaleway. I thought that sounds really interesting, because that is a European cloud provider, so not American. And also they were already very communicating a lot about the sustainable aspect of what they do. So I was very happy to join them and lead their communications from 2021 with this huge focus on sustainability. Yeah, that's basically where it started. But at that time, Scaleway had its own data centers, and one of them called DC5, which is one of the most sustainable in Europe, because it doesn't have air conditioning, so it uses a lot less energy.
Adiabatic cooling.
That's it, yeah. And it has adiabatic cooling. So we focused a lot of communication efforts on that. But then after a year or two, Scaleway decided to sell its data centers. So I had to look at what are the other ways I could talk about sustainability in the cloud. And sort of from digging around into green IT, especially into some green software foundation resources, I basically understood that it's not just data centers, it's hardware and software. So I also, with a bit of help from one of a pivotal meeting, was meeting Niels Fryer from the Green Software Foundation at a conference. I got him to come and speak at Scaleway to people who, like me, were sort of concerned about the impact of tech. And then that led to the white paper that you mentioned that I released in 2023, which is basically how engineers can reduce the impact of technology. So, and then that led to speaking opportunities, and then just sort of realized that, yeah, I'm not a developer. I'm not an engineer. I may be the first non-developer on this podcast, so I can't build green tech, but I can explain how it works. And I think that's an important thing to be able to do if we want to convince as many people as possible of how important this is. Then it needs to be communicated properly. And yeah, so that's what I've been doing ever since.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so I appreciate that you're coming here as someone who's not like a full-time techie who's like using GitHub on the daily and everything like that, because I think that means you get a bit of a chance to like see how normal people see it who aren't conversant in like object storage or block storage or stuff like that. So maybe we could talk a little bit about that then, because when people start to think about, say, the environmental footprint of digital services, right, it's often coming from a very, very low base. And it's like people might start thinking about like the carbon footprint of their emails, and that's like the thing they should be focusing on first. And like if you do have a bit of domain knowledge, you'll often realize that actually that's probably not where you'd start if you have a kind of more developed understanding of the problem. Now, you spend some of your time being this translator between techies and like people who are not full, who aren't writing code and building applications all day long, for example. So maybe we could talk a little bit about like the misunderstandings people have when they come to this in the first place, and how you might address some of this, because this seems to be your day job, and this might be something that might help who are other techies realize how they might change the way they talk about this to other people to make it a bit more accessible and intelligible.
Yes. So thank you for mentioning day job first and foremost, because Scaleway was my former day job, and I have another day job working for another French scale up. But here I'm very much speaking in the name of my blog. It's because I care so much about these topics that I continue to talk about them, to write about them on the side, because I just think it's something that needs to be done. So this is why I'm speaking today with my Better Tech hat on.
Yeah.
So yeah, just wanted to make that clear. The first thing that people do when people misunderstand stuff, the first thing I want to say is it's not their fault. Sometimes they are led down the wrong path. Like a few years ago, the French environment minister said people should stop trying to send so many funny email attachments.
Really?
Like when you send a jokey video to all your colleagues, you should stop doing that, because it's not good for the planet. Honestly, the minister could say something that misguided, because that's not where you and I know that's not where the impact is. The impact is in the cloud. The impact is in hardware. So it's about the communication is repetition, and I always start with digital is 4% of global emissions. 1% of that is data centers. 3% of that is hardware, and software is sort of all over the place. So that's the thing that's the figure I use the most to get things started. And I think the number one misconception that people need to get their heads around is people tend to think that tech is immaterial. It's because of expressions like the cloud. It just sounds
like this floaty thing rather than massive
ethereal. We need to make it. Yeah. We need to make it more physical. If I can't remember who said that if data centers could fly, then it would make our job a lot easier. But no, that's why you need to always come back to the figures. 4% is double the emissions of planes, and yet the airline industry gets hundreds times more hassle than the tech industry in terms of trying to keep control of their emissions. So what you need is a lot more tangible examples, and you need people to explain this impact over time. So you need to move away from bad examples like funny email attachments, or the thing about they keep hearing in AI is one ChatGPT prompt is 10 times more energy than Google. That may or may not be true, but it's a bit of it's the wrong example, because it doesn't focus on the bigger picture, and it
kind of implies,
and it can make
if I just like reduce my usage of this, then I'm going to have like 10 times the impact. I'm going to, that's all I need to do. That feels a bit kind of individualizing the problem, surely.
It does, and it's putting it on it's putting the onus on the users, whereas it's, once again, it's not their fault. You need to see the bigger picture, and this is what I've been repeating since I wrote that white paper. Actually, you can't say you have a green IT approach if you're only focusing on data centers, hardware or software. You've got to focus on all three. Otherwise, yeah, exactly, holistically. That said, you should also encourage people to have greener habits, because that's me stopping using ChatGPT just on my own won't have much impact, but it will if I can tell my family, if I can tell my friends, if I can talk about it in podcasts and conferences, then maybe the more people question their usage, then maybe the providers of that tech will start providing more frugal examples. But yeah, I'll come back to that.
So that's like maybe almost like choice architecture, giving people like, foregrounding some of the options. So making it easier to do possibly the more sustainable thing, rather than making people right at the end of the process do all the hard work.
Yeah.
It sounds like you're suggesting that, okay, as a professional, part of my role is to kind of put different choices in front of someone who's maybe using my service to make it easier for them to do more sustainable things, rather than like things which are much more environmentally destructive, for example.
Yes. And I would add a final thing, which is sort of super important, because there are a lot of topics like electric cars, for example, which people get really emotional and angry about, because people are very attached to their cars, and yet cars are the number one source of emissions in most Western countries. The way around the emotion is to use, I really focus on only using science-based facts. If it's from the IPCC, if it's from the IEA, if it's from like really serious scientific studies, then you can use it. If it's just someone speculating on LinkedIn, no. So I always make sure that the data I use is as fully backed by science, by a sort of scope, by all the GHG protocols, looking at all three scopes, all that sort of thing, because otherwise you just can't. It could be greenwashing.
Okay. All right. So maybe this is actually a nice segue for the next question, because when people talk about, say, well, basically in footprint from here, one of the challenges people have is like having some numbers, having some figures for any of this stuff. For example, if I'm using maybe a chatbot, it's very hard for me to understand what the footprint might be. So in the absence of that, you can kind of see how people end up with an idea saying, oh yeah, every query is the same as a bottle of water, for example, simply because there is a kind of dearth of information. And this is something that I think that I remember when you presented at Green.io, a conference around kind of green IT, you were talking about how this is actually something that you've had quite a lot of first-hand experience with now, particularly when you're working at Scaleway, because there's like new calculators published and stuff like that. I mean, we can talk about the AI thing in a bit more detail later. And but I wanted to ask you a little bit about the impact calculators that I saw you present before. So are there any principles or any kind of approaches that you think are really helpful when you're helping people engage with a topic like this, when they're trying to use a calculator to kind of modify or like improve the footprint as like a professional?
Yes. Well, one of the things that sort of piqued my curiosity when we were looking into the topic at Scaleway is what percentage of servers of instances are really used. And I was inspired by that, by the work of Holly Cummins from Red Hat who famously said that zombie instances possibly represent around 25% of cloud activity. When I asked around, do cloud providers in general try and identify that zombie activity and to shut it down? From asking around various cloud providers, the consensus I seemed to get was well, no, because people are paying for those instances, so we're just gonna why would we flag that sort of thing? So that also shows the sort of pushback that an environmental calculator might get, even though, I mean, you could argue that the fact that there are zombie instances has potentially more the client's fault than the cloud provider's fault. But yeah, the building a project like that is just to say that you're going up against years of habits where people haven't really. If you want more resources, you can have them, even if you've got too many. It's sort of, it's been on, the cloud has been pretty much a all-you-can-eat service in general since it was invented. So going a sort of trying to get people to use it more responsibly can be seen a bit as going against the grain. But the good news is we got lots of really positive feedback from clients about it, and I don't know how it's doing now, but I'm sure it's doing some really useful work.
So you said, so I just want to check one thing, because we said this idea of zombie instances. My guess when you say that is that's basically a running virtual machine or something like that that's consuming resources, but it doesn't appear to be doing any obviously useful work. Is that what a zombie is in this context, right?
Yep.
Okay, cool. And I can kind of see like why you might not want to kind of turn people's stuff off on that, because if you're running a data center, you're kind of incentivized to keep things up. And if you're selling stuff, you're kind of incentivized to kind of make sure there's always stuff available, right? But I kind of see your point. Like if you're not at least making this visible to people, then yeah, how are people able to make kind of maybe any responsible choices about, okay, is this really the right size, for example? And if like a chunk of your revenue is reliant on that, that's probably another reason that you might not want to do some of that stuff. So
exactly.
Okay. So there's like a change of incentives that we need to think about. But I know that one thing that I have seen people talking about in France a lot is actually not just looking at energy. And yeah, okay, France has quite a clean grid because there's lots of things like low carbon energy, like nuclear and stuff like that. But is there something else to that? Like why, is it just because the energy is clean, there's nothing else to do? Or is there a bigger thing that you need to be aware of if you're building a calculator or making some of these figures available to people? Is energy the full picture, or is there more to it that we should be thinking about?
No, exactly. That was really the real unique point about Scaleway's calculators. It was not just a carbon calculator, so not just energy and emissions, but also the impact of hardware and also the impact of water. How much water is your data center using? And that was a really important part of the project. And I remember my colleagues telling me the most challenging part of the project was actually getting the hardware data off the manufacturers, because they don't necessarily declare it. NVIDIA, for example, still gives no lifecycle analysis data on their GPUs. So it's incredible, but there it is. So basically, what Scaleway set out to do is the opposite of what AWS does, which is AWS says, we've bought all this green energy, renewable energy, we've bought enough carbon credits to cover us for the next 7 years. Therefore, your cloud is green.
Yeah, nothing to do, no changes. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is completely false, because it's ignoring the scope 3, which is the biggest share of emissions, or the indirect emissions. So all of that is ignored. I worked out from a report a while ago that nearly 65% of the tech sector's emissions are unaccounted for. It's a complete in the dark. And then if you consider that only 11% of tech impacts our emissions, the rest is hardware, then we're really what the information that we've got so far is like it's just a tiny portion of the real impact. So that was why it was such a big deal that Scale A was setting out to cover as much of the real impact as possible, because again, once you have as broad a picture as possible of that impact, then you can make the right decisions. As you were saying, Chris, then you can choose. I'm going to go for data centers in France because, as they say, because they have this lower carbon intensity. I might try and use this type of product because it uses less energy. And I'd say that is an added value that a cloud provider can bring, that should attract more clients. I'd have thought with you've got things like CSRD and all sorts of other regulation.
It's literally written into the standards that you need to declare Scope 3 for cloud and services and data centers now. So
exactly,
if getting that numbers is easier, then yeah, I can see why that would be helpful, actually.
Absolutely.
All right, we'll share a link to that specific part of the European Sustainability Reporting Standards, because it kind of blew my mind when I saw it, actually. Like, I didn't realize it was really, really that explicit. And that's something that we have. So you mentioned NVIDIA, and you mentioned there's a kind of like somewhat unknown environmental footprint associated with the actual hardware itself. And as I understand it, you mentioned GenAI Impact, which is an organization that's been doing some work to make some of these numbers a bit more visible to people when they're using some of that. Maybe I could just ask you a little bit, and I know, as I understand it, is GenAI Impact, is it based primarily in France?
Yes, yeah. So the sort of my origin story for that was, it was again, Green IO. More hats off to Gaël. So that was at Green IO Paris 2023. It ended with a presentation from Theo Alves da Costa, who is the co-president of Data for Good, which is a French ONG which has this like 6,000 data scientists, engineers who are all putting their skills for good, basically, as volunteers. So he did this presentation, which notably drew on a white paper from Data for Good, which said that we didn't really know that much at the time, but that the impact of inference could be anything from 20 to 200 times more than the impact of training. So, and he showed it with these bubbles, and and I just looked at it and went, "Oh my God, this is beyond this goes way beyond any level of cloud impact that we'd been used to before." So yeah, that drew me to get interested in. I went to Data for Good's next meeting, and that's where they launched GenAI Impact, which is the project which ended up producing Ecologits.ai, which is a super handy calculator.
This is a tool to give you to like plugs into, like, if you're using any kind of generative AI tools. As I understand it, like, because we looked at it ourselves, like if you're using maybe some Python code to call ChatGPT or Mistral or something, it will give you some of the numbers as you do it, and it'll give you like the hardware, the water usage and stuff like that. It gives you some figures, right?
Exactly. And the way it does it is pretty clever. So it will mostly measure open source models, which is easy because you know what their parameters are and all the data is open. And it will compare that with closed models. So it will be able to give you an estimation of the impact of closed models like GPT, ChatGPT. So you can use it to say, what is the impact of writing a tweet with ChatGPT versus what is the impact of doing it with Llama or whatever. And because big tech is so opaque, and this is one of my big bugbears, it means that it gives us a sort of
that's the best you got.
Very educated guess, and which is something that should encourage people to use more frugal AI. That's the idea.
Okay, so This is one thing that I'm always amazed by when I go to France, because there seems to be the field seems to be further along, definitely than Germany, for example. And like, for example, France had the AI Action Summit this year. It's the only country in the world with a kind of government-supported frugal AI challenge. You've mentioned this a few times, and I might give you a bit of space to actually tell people what frugal AI actually is. I mean, maybe we could talk, how does the conversation about AI, for example, how does it differ in France compared to maybe somewhere else in the world, like that you've experienced? Because it does feel different to me, but I'm not quite sure why. And I figure as someone who's in France, you've probably got a better idea about what's different and what's driving that.
Yeah, it really is it is the place to be. So let's say you've seen that Paris just moved ahead of London as the sort of one of the best places for startups to be at the moment. And one of the reasons for that is that France has a very strong AI ecosystem. Everyone thinks of Mistral first and foremost, but there are lots of others. But yeah, I just wanted to talk first, before I get into that, I wanted to talk about why do we need frugal AI? Because it's not something that people think about on a daily basis. Like I was saying before, my wife the other day she's a teacher, and she was using ChatGPT to help prepare her lesson. And I was like, no, don't use that. There are lots of other alternatives. But to her, of course, and to the 800 million people who use a ChatGPT every week, they do it because it's free, and they do it because it works really well. But what they don't know is that because of tools like ChatGPT, and we know that ChatGPT is amongst the highest impact type of model, data center energy consumption is going to triple or maybe even quadruple by the end of the decade. And data center water consumption is going to quadruple by the end of the decade. And there are lots of very serious studies they all came out at the end of last year, most of them. They all concur that this is, all of these, if you put all of their graphs together, they are they're very similar. And the scariest thing about them, in fact, is that they show that data center energy consumption has been pretty much flat for the past 15 years, because whilst cloud usage has been surging, something like 500%, the data center operators like Scaleway and lots of other companies have been able to optimize that energy usage and keep it flat. The problem is that AI is, because this has all been based on CPUs, because AI uses GPUs, which use 4 times more energy and heat up 2.5 times more than CPUs. The curve has gone like this. It's done a complete dogleg, because the consumption of GPUs is just on such a different scale that the tricks to keep it under control before don't work anymore. So we are really in we've reached a tipping point. And it is because partly people are generating millions of Ghibli images or starter packs, or I'm simplifying a lot, but what I'm questioning is how, when you look at that graph, how much of this activity is really useful? How much of it is curing cancer, or the greatest joke of all, fixing climate change? When what's actually happening is it's making it worse. In that this dogleg is so sharp that we can't build nuclear power quickly enough to fill up this demand. So what's happening is that coal burning energy generators, or gas are being kept open so that we can keep making those images and doing homework and all that sort of thing. So that is, in a nutshell, is why we need frugal AI. And we need it also because it has been built in a way. If if you haven't read the book Empire of AI yet by Emily Howe, you should. It's very strongly recommended, because one of the things it explains is that the genesis of OpenAI, at some point they decided that the bigger your model is, the more compute power it uses, the better it will be. And they've just been building on that premise ever since the launch of ChatGPT. Whereas the fact is, the most recent versions of ChatGPT or GPT actually hallucinate more than the less powerful versions. So why do we need to throw all that power at it when, as we see from talking to people like the amazing Sasha Lucioni, with LLMs, for example, you have models that are 30 to 60 times smaller, which can do just as good a job. So these are the sort of conversations that you can have a lot in France, which is really sort of standing out today as a frugal AI pioneer. The fact that over 90% of French electricity is carbon free that helps a lot. That's something that Mistral in particular leans on a lot. Say we've got clean energy, therefore we're green. Watch out for the AWS effect. But it is a very good point, because all the ChatGPT and other impact that's happening in America. And so I was very happy to see, because of big tech's opacity, Ecologits, which, as you mentioned, is a Python library, it very quickly became a global reference because that's all we had.
So when the buzz on the floor, it doesn't need to be very high.
Right? Yeah, exactly. It's like my favorite tweet. I think my favorite tweet of the year so far is Sam Altman. I can even share the link to the tweet because I love it so much. It basically said, when all these hundreds of thousands of millions of Ghibli images happened, and he joked that their GPUs were melting. He shared this completely ridiculous graph, which said, this is the water impact of one ChatGPT query, and this is the water impact of one burger. Yeah. And Sam Altman's comment in the tweet was, anti-AI people making up shit about the impact of ChatGPT whilst eating burgers. And I just found it so cynical, because I'm not anti-AI. I'm anti-waste. So that's the first point. And the second point, the reason that the people have to make shit up is because they don't declare shit. So if they did, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. We would be able to say, ChatGPT is this, Gemini is this, Llama is this, and we'd be able to compare everyone on the same playing field. But
on their merits, yeah.
So coming back to France, because I'm wary of going off on a rant. The French government is really has been incredible on this topic. So they around the time of that the AI Action Summit, they supported a frugal AI challenge, whereby people were encouraged to complete AI tasks across audio, text, and image. And if you would win the challenge by completing the tasks whilst using X times less energy than the big LLMs. And so the projects that won, they used like 60 times, one of them used 60 times less energy than a big LLM, sort of proving that the big LLMs are not necessary.
And it was solving the same task, because I think from memory, there was a few challenges which were like, combat disinformation online, discover something useful. There were things like they weren't something which was like, these were considered socially useful problems, but people were free to use any kind of approach they were to take. And what you're saying is that okay, you could use an LLM to solve one of them, but solve it one way, but there's other ways that they solved it. And some of the winners were quite, 60 times more efficient, essentially.
Exactly.
60 times less consumptive, right?
Exactly. So, it's great to have projects like that. The French government has obtained funding for, it's around a dozen Frugal AI projects, which are being run by municipalities all over France. So they're using it to optimize energy usage or to detect garbage in the street or that sort of thing. So that's great. The French government also supports the Frugal AI guidelines of AFNOR. AFNOR is France's France's official standards organization. And what they've done is basically to say, for your AI to be frugal, it needs to correspond with these criteria. The first criteria, which I love, is can you prove that this solution cannot be solved by anything else than AI? So it's pretty strict. There are three first steps to it, but then it goes into a lot of detail about what is or is not frugal AI. And that's such pioneering work that it's on track to become EU standards. So that's some great work there. But I think for me, one of the best arguments that I use about why should you bother with frugal AI is very simply the French Ministry for the Environment has said to startups, if you want to work with us, you have to prove that your AI is frugal first. So that's
okay. So it's like they're creating demand pool then, essentially. Yeah. This is your carrot. Your carrot is a fat government contract.
Yes.
But you need to demonstrate that you're actually following these principles in what you do.
I love that because it shows that doing things frugally can actually be good for your business.
Okay, all right. So, wow, I think we should definitely make sure we've got some links for a bunch of that stuff because I wasn't aware that there. I know that France in the kind of world of W3C, they have. It's the RGESN. I forget. Yes. I'm not going to. I'm not going to butcher the pronunciation, but it broadly translates to like a general policy for eco design. And I know that's on like a standards track for Europe.
Yes.
If I can find the actual French words, I might try to share it, but or maybe you might be able to help me with that one because my French is not is nowhere good enough to spell it properly. But I'm also aware that France is actually one of the first countries in the world to actually have like a digital sustainability law. There was one in 2020, the REEN.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
That's it. Yeah, I was very focused on AI with all those examples, but yeah, France is the only country which has a Digital Responsibility Act called REEN, which basically says, for example, that any municipality with over 50,000 inhabitants has to publish their digital responsibility strategy, even if it's just we're going to keep our PCs going for longer, or sort of simple stuff like that. This French law demands that municipalities, not only make an effort on these things, but they show that they are making an effort. So it's really,
I see.
Yeah, in a sort of a great incentive.
Okay. So that I now understand. So with the IGESN, as I understand it, that was essentially something like a set of guidelines for France.
RGESN it's two different things. RGESN are the guidelines for eco-conception. So the how to make your website not only more energy efficient, but also more accessible to people of varying abilities. There's also a law that just came into effect here in France to make websites more accessible. So that it's great to see those two things going hand in hand. They also announced at the AI Action Summit that they were going to invest 100 billion in new data centers for AI by the end of the decade. You win some, you lose some. But again, maybe it's better to do that here with lower carbon energy than in the States, which is generally speaking 10 times more carbon in the electricity.
Okay, it sounds like there's a lot happening in France.
Yeah.
So not only are they talking, so there is this whole, not only is there's an idea of like frugal AI and digital sobriety, which is this other French term which when translated in English always sounds really strange to my ears, but there's actually quite a lot of, for want of a better word, like policy support behind this stuff to actually encourage people to work in this way, basically.
Yes, absolutely. And again, I would give another heads up to Data for Good for that, because they were instrumental in that Frugal AI challenge, along with Sasha Luciani, who, by the way, will be speaking at Vivatech. So Vivatech is France's biggest tech event. It's actually one of the biggest tech events in Europe. Unfortunately, they had Elon Musk as their keynote last year and the year before. Fortunately, they won't this year. Yeah. Sasha is going to be one of their keynotes this year, which is also great. I think it's a good sign. And she will also be speaking on a panel as part of a sustainability summit with Kate Callett, which is of Amini AI, and I'll be moderating that conversation. So I'm very happy that these sort of conversations are happening not only
mainstream, but
not exactly, yeah, not only between people like you and me who care and who understand all the tech, but it's super important, as I was saying at the beginning, to be having these conversations with as broad an audience as possible, because otherwise nothing is going to change.
Okay, so we've gone quite deeply into talking about AI and hardware and water and stuff like that. If we pull back out, so we talk about how people might engage with this topic in the first place. If there's one thing you could change about how people talk about sustainability, particularly in technology, what would you change, James?
I suppose I'd resume it as don't believe the hype. And the hype in tech is usually bigger is better. What I would like people to try and really integrate is that bigger isn't always better. As we said before, it's very important to look at the holistic picture of impacts rather than just the individual ones. It's more important to pressure companies to change, as you see with that French government example, rather than making users feel guilty because, again, it's not their fault. And I just think people, what I'm trying to do as often as I can, Chris, is just bring people back to that sort of gold standard of green IT, which is only use the right tools for the right needs. This is why this sort of bigger is better thing is just so irritating to me. The way AI is being done right now, it's a classic in tech. It's using a bazooka to swat a fly. It's not necessary, and it's actually not only is it ridiculous, but it's also very bad for the planet. So if you only need to do this much, you only need a tool that does this much, not this much. And that's one of the reasons that why when I hear the term AI for good, which we hear a lot of at the moment, I would say that I always challenge that. And I would encourage people to challenge that too by saying, are you sure this AI is for good? Are you sure this tech is for good? Are you sure that the good that it does far outweighs the potential harm that it has? Because it's not always the case. A lot of the AI for good examples that you see at the moment are they can't be backed with scientific data at all. And that comes back to another of my points. If you can't prove that it's for good, then it's not. And it's probably greenwashing.
So show us your receipts then, basically. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks for that, James. James, we're just coming up to time now. So if people have found this interesting and they wanted to learn more about either your writing or where you'll be next, where should people be looking? Is there you mentioned the website, for example. Is there anywhere else people should be looking to kind of keep up with like updates from you or anything like that?
The website is bettertech.blog. So yeah, that's the main that's where you can find a lot more resources about my work on the impact of AI and on other things. I also post quite frequently on LinkedIn about this sort of thing. Like things like the last one was about frugal prompting. That's my latest discovery. Those are the two main sources, and I will work together to make sure that the links,
we have all the links for the show notes
are in the footnotes of this episode.
Brilliant. Well, James, thank you so much for giving me the time and to everyone who's listening for all of this. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the day in what appears to be sunny Paris behind you.
It's been sunnier, but it's fine. It's still Paris, so we mustn't grumble. Thanks very much, Chris.
Indeed.
Thanks very much, Chris. It's like I said, it's been a real honor to be on this podcast, and I hope we've been able to share stuff that's useful for people.
Merci beaucoup, James.
Merci à toi, Chris.
À bientôt. Hey everyone, thanks for listening. Just a reminder to follow Environment Variables on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And please do leave a rating and review if you like what we're doing. It helps other people discover the show. And of course, we'd love to have more listeners. To find out more about the Green Software Foundation, please visit greensoftware.foundation. That's greensoftware.foundation in any browser. Thanks again, and see you in the next episode.